We are renowned for snappy put-downs and giving good headlines, but public brilliance masks private turmoil. With Celebrity Test Me and David Suchet as the man who brought showbiz to court, BBC Two witnesses the trials of George Carman, QC.
I won't have myself destroyed in this way when he knows very well that his client is lying.
The liar. Her accuser, George Carmen, QC, the formidable courtroom operator.
Mr. Carman, I have read it, and I have got the point.
I am in contempt.
Listen, can you hear it?
Do you find the defendant guilty or not guilty?
What did you mean by give good head?
Our barrister, he said, have you got any skeletons in your cupboard? Because, believe you me, George Carman will get them.
If his lordship were to make those dramatic judgments...
Will the foreman of the jury please stand?
Now that, ladies and gentlemen, is the beating heart of British justice. A reassuring sound, yes? Mr. Aitken, as a man who claims to take up the sword of truth, you have made yourself a stranger to the truth whenever it suits you.
It's rather like facing one of the world's great fast bowlers with bouncers and bumpers and blows.
Call me George. Most people did.
Once a glamorous South African newspaper columnist, in court, Jenny Allen was called a liar.
Mr. Carman, whatever award is given for libel, being cross-examined by you would not make it enough money.
As I walked out of that court case, I knew that I would never be the same again. Maybe that's what being Carmanized is about.
George had a gift for knowing what would make a great headline.
Mr. Hamilton was a greedy and unscrupulous politician who was on the make and on the take. Mr. Mellor stuck his head in the sand like an ostrich, thereby exposing his thinking parts.
He was certainly seen as the jury advocate of his generation.
There were many different Georges. Everybody got a slightly different George.
He had a number of demons in his own mind that were tormenting him.
Self-destruction, self-hatred, insecurity, the three faces of George.
I've got you. Now there's a man who held an audience in the palm of his hand. He made them believe he was one of them, that he had lived life like they had. And that is the first rule of persuading a jury. 12 people just like you. Make them think you're the same as they are. Use their language. That was my first lesson in court.
By the time he died last year, George Carman had finally, painfully, achieved his ambition. He'd become Britain's most successful and most feared courtroom advocate.
He was much shorter than I thought he was going to be. But he had such presence. He dominated any room he was in. He drew people's attention into him, and that was the same whether he was in a room, whether he was in court. Your eye always went towards him. He had something that he exuded that commanded attention.
George had that aura about him, where no matter what rank of life you come from, he could get on with you, and you felt confident in him. No matter if you were the Duke of Edinburgh, or the best smash and grab raider in the business.
Some say good old George, others are not so particular.
He used to enjoy watching the performers on Blackpool Pier, and particularly he enjoyed watching the reactions of the audience. And I think those facial reactions and the responses to words being used on stage made a significant impact on him. Lessons he never forgot. Keep it simple, keep people's attention.
Anyway, it's turned out nice. You can go on, Eddie.
He would refer to soaps, he would refer to current pop stars, so be more likely to talk about EastEnders than he would about Homer.
Soap operas? Yes, but with one important difference. When a curtain comes down on a case, it's the fate of real people that's been decided, and often conclusively. My first major case was a perfect example, and that was a long time coming.
It was a case that shook British politics to its core. He was the charismatic political leader, the man who would reverse the electoral fortunes of the Liberal Party. Jeremy Thorpe was at the height of his popularity when the unthinkable happened.
It was the 4th of August 1978. We went to listen to the lunchtime news on the radio, aware that there was going to be an announcement concerning Jeremy Thorpe.
Mr. Thorpe seemed to have difficulty in steering, driving his car rather close to cameramen.
He had, in fact, been charged with conspiracy to murder. And my father looked at me and said, I can do it. I can get him off.
You know that it would be untrue. You know that I would be a liar.
The best-known defendant, Mr. Jeremy Thorpe, arrived with his wife Marion at a little before 10.
The Thorpe trial at the Old Bailey was held as the trial of the century. And here you had Jeremy Thorpe, leader of the Liberal Party, in court number 1, charged with conspiracy to murder. And you had to pinch yourself that it was really happening.
It so happened that David Napley said, I'm thinking of instructing George Carman. And I said, George who?
The time to hesitate is through. No time to wallow in the mire.
Good morning. Good morning.
Try now, we can only lose.
George Carmen was nearly 50 when he defended Jeremy Thorpe.
I know what you're thinking. 50? What on earth had he been doing? Well, I'd been slogging it out at the bar for 25 years. At times earning the equivalent of a Manchester bus driver without overtime. But I knew I was ready to take centre stage. There was a quote I was fond of at the time, Shakespeare, I think. There is a tide in the affairs of men which, taken at the flood, leads on to fortune. Well, this was my tide.
The prosecution accused Thorpe and 3 others of conspiring to kill former male model Norman Scott. They said Thorpe was terrified that allegations that he'd had a gay affair with Scott would become public and ruin his political career. So he'd hired a hitman to eliminate the problem. The alleged assassination went wrong, and the only victim was Scott's Great Dane, Rinka. But the case against Thorpe and the others went ahead. Flying in for the trial, the prosecution's key witness, Peter Bessel. Bessel had been a Liberal MP, a Methodist lay preacher, and crucially one of Thorpe's closest political allies. But now his testimony could end Thorpe's career in the most dramatic way possible. Thorpe, he said, had not only told him about his plan to kill Scott, he had suggested another potential murder.
So what steps did you take to acquaint the Liberal Party, the police, doctors, Mrs. Thorpe, that the leader of the Liberal Party was insane?
None, sir.
You've not left out any other murders?
No.
You're not going to mention a third or fourth tomorrow.
He would turn to the jury as if to say, "Did you hear that? Do you appreciate the significance of it?" And then he would turn back to the witness. And what it came down to, I suppose, was an element of theatre. He was like one of those Victorian actor managers. He would gather his robes round him. He seemed to be taller than he actually was. He would pause, he would look at the jury, he would draw them in as the audience. Do you hear what I want you to hear? Are you getting the essential points?
George Carman was so clever, he completely destroyed the credibility of the prosecution witnesses. I mean, you ended up feeling that you wouldn't believe a word any of them said.
Yet when Mr. Thorpe got his vote of confidence in 1976, you were delighted.
Yes, sir.
Does this make you a thoroughly A-model person?
I think it does.
If you were publicly preaching Christianity, add hypocrite?
Yes.
A-model, hypocrite, liar. Is that not a scoundrel?
He would just pause, and he was a master of the pause.
Silence is a deadly weapon.
The story unfolding at the Old Bailey had the public shocked and transfixed. Homosexuality had only recently been legalised, but that didn't mean political leaders could admit to gay affairs. So when Norman Scott, the target of the alleged conspiracy, came to court claiming he'd had sex with Thorpe, it was vital that Carmen destroyed his credibility, but without making the jury feel sorry for the witness.
Carmen took full advantage of the fact that Norman Scott had had medical attention in the past. He'd been a psychiatrist.
You were saying you had a sexual relationship with Mr. Thorpe before you went to the House of Commons?
Yes.
Well, quite obviously that wasn't true.
No, it wasn't.
Well, in fairness to you, were you saying it because you were suffering from a delusion?
Yes.
And you had suffered from other delusions, had you not?
Yes.
George took it softly, softly. It was almost softly, softly, catchy monkey. He was very gentle with him. And it was a tightrope, and it was always going to be the most difficult cross-examination of the lot. And he got it bang on, he got it absolutely right.
Are you claiming the sexual activity on the first night at the home of Mrs. Thorpe was without your consent?
There was nothing I could do because I was in their house tired and woozy. I was broken and crying. I didn't know what was happening until it was too late. I assure you it happened.
Do not get excited.
I am not getting excited, but it is stupid. Do you think that I enjoy saying these terrible things? Or talking about it? It is most horrendous. Sir, I am in contempt of this court.
You may find that an uncomfortable place to be.
Are you going to answer any further questions for me?
I will not answer any more questions. I have gone on enough about this story. I will not have myself destroyed in this way.
Do you want to go home now?
Don't mind where I go. I won't have myself destroyed in this way when he knows very well that his client is lying. I have had enough.
I'm sorry, Mr. Scott, but it is my professional duty to ask a considerable number of further questions. Are you going to answer them?
And the jury, just suddenly, you could see recognition. They realized what they were dealing with.
I have nothing to say.
George sat down, and he demolished him. Demolished him.
Girls will be boys and boys will be girls. It's a mixed up, muddled up, shook up.
Everyone in the courtroom and the country was waiting to hear from Jeremy Thorpe. But Carmen advised Thorpe not to go into the witness box. Instead, Carmen's own closing speech would act as Thorpe's voice.
This was going to be his speech of the century, and he was very excited. And he lay in the bath, of sort of water up to his neck, practicing his summing up and asking me which version did I like. I wasn't allowed in the bathroom. I had to sit outside the bathroom.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you may have thought that you were trying Jeremy Thorpe on the issue of homosexuality. 5 weeks it took me. 5 weeks to write my closing speech to the jury. It had to be dramatic. It had to make the jury feel like this was the biggest decision of their lives. It had to, well, frankly, it had to make a headline or two. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have the right as citizens to vote in elections. But you have a much more important right and a far greater responsibility to vote guilty or not guilty.
It would build to a climax like a speech, a dramatic speech. And then when that happened, you could find yourself holding your breath.
Mr. Thorpe has spent over 20 years in British politics and obtained thousands and thousands of votes in his favor.
Everybody in court would be quiet and the whole attention would be directed onto him, and it was quite mesmerizing.
Now the most precious 12 votes of all come from you, and 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 you.
I was there, and it happened as it happened in the bath.
In accordance with your conscience, I say to you, on behalf of Jeremy Thorpe, this prosecution has not been made out. Let this prosecution fold their tent and silently steal away.
We had 2 nights in an hotel, and we were not allowed to listen to the radio or to read any newspapers. The judge wanted a unanimous verdict, And when we finally got it, you know, I put my head in my hands then and thought, my God, are we doing the right thing?
Do you find the defendant, Mr. David Holmes, guilty or not guilty of conspiracy to murder?
Not guilty.
Mr. George Deakin?
Not guilty.
Mr. John Le Mesurier?
Not guilty.
And in respect of Mr. Jeremy Thorpe?
Not guilty.
He'd just come in with a huge explosion, not only in the biggest case of the century, but his client was acquitted. You know, in a sense, there was the danger that it was all going to be downhill from then on. Well, we know that it wasn't.
Despite the verdict, Jeremy Thorpe's career was finished. Carmen's was just beginning. George Carman was born and brought up in Blackpool. His father was an auctioneer, his mother a dressmaker. Carmen was educated at a Christian Brothers school and briefly considered becoming a priest. He left Blackpool aged 19 to study law at Balliol College, Oxford.
There were many who tried to deter him from entering the profession because he had neither money nor contacts, both of which were seen as prerequisites to become a young barrister.
I think quite a lot of his motivation may well have been that he was a grammar school boy, that he came from a middle class or lower middle class background. I think he was proving something to the end.
Carman's legal career began around the Manchester courts. He found that he suffered from an unusual affliction.
He would become nervous in performing in front of a judge or a jury and would have what are called vasovagal attack, where he would literally pass out, blank out for a minute or 5 minutes and then come to his feet and probably have a cigarette and be fine.
Carman battled with those nerves throughout his career, and his private life proved to be equally troubled. He was married 3 times.
He wasn't particularly good looking, or he wasn't particularly tall or handsome or anything like that, except he had a certain, I suppose you could call it a certain charisma about him.
You make me smile.
He showed me a lifestyle that was completely new to me. He asked me to go out to a very expensive restaurant, so it impressed me tremendously, so that was good.
Your looks are laughable.
I had been doing a bit of nightclub work and so on, singing. He came along there, and he spoke very quietly, and his hand movements were... He had nice hands. I remember noticing that.
Work of art.
And he got down on one knee, terribly romantic, a real little act, you know, like he was in court. And he got down on his knee and he produced from his pocket his mother's diamond ring, and he asked me to marry him.
When you are...
He said to me, I want you to be the mother of my son. And that was his proposal. He said, so we must get married. It was as simple as that. And he said son, and I was told after Dominic was born, you got it right. Good.
Carmen's drive to succeed was clear from the start. But as he was starting to make a name for himself in court, he was also acquiring a reputation in less formal surroundings.
He worked hard in court and did well, and he worked hard enjoying himself at night. I remember him talking about a place that he would go to that was, I think, a little bit dangerous. He found that exciting. It gave him a certain frisson. He enjoyed mixing with some very colourful characters.
Well, every Friday in the evening, I used to go in Blondes in Dover Street, terrific bar at the time, and George would come in. And great, we'd have a great drink together. And he'd come in with a certain style, there was something there. And there'd be other people like me, all done bird. And he was great company. He got on with everyone, even rascals like me. And he liked to drink and all. Thank God for that.
He'd drink with anybody. He'd drink absolutely with anybody.
My father's drinking was very much a day-to-day part of life. He had a fantastic constitution. He had an amazing capacity to drink heavily, manage a little sleep and get on his feet and go to court, quite often with little or no preparation.
Sometimes he would be very drunk. I've got to be at court in the morning, Celia, he'd say. Walk me round the garden. And we'd walk round the garden. I'd make him black coffee, orange juice. He'd go up to the bathroom and he'd be sick all over the wall, all over the carpet and things like that. And I'd just try to clean it all up. He said, leave that alone, I've got to be at court in the morning. So that would have to be left, fermenting nicely in the carpet for me to clean at some future time.
And we'd be trying to find him everywhere. We'd be trying to get him out of some seedy bar in Manchester. And his clerk would have his gown, stick it on him and boot him into court.
But the late-night carousing didn't seem to affect Carmen's courtroom performance. Not even when he was appearing in one of his first big criminal trials.
Well, the following morning was going to be the big morning of his career to date. And we went out to dinner, we moved on to whiskey after that, and stayed up till quite late, in fact, worryingly late, I think. And I think virtually poured George back into his apartment in the early hours, and just worried that he was going to be there on time, and he was, bright as a button, raring to go, and stood up in court, and just stunned the court within 5 seconds.
Carmen won, although it would be several years before he defended Jeremy Thorpe. But the first signs of success in his professional life didn't appear to bring comfort for those at home.
I had to have my hair done every day at least, and every time we went out, you'd say, hair? That's fine. Nails? Hold them out for inspection. I've never worn nail varnish since.
One of the things that is said about him was that he was a misogynist and would cast women in terms of their virtue rather than their talents. And it was, I felt, part of that old-fashioned, almost Victorian values about women. And I think that he pandered to jury's prejudices on it, and successfully.
Libel is not for the faint-hearted. I take it from me, if you're going to launch a libel action, then you better make sure your cupboard is free of skeletons. Asking a jury to award you large sums of money and damages means your private life becomes fair game.
The Jenny Allen case had everything. It had glamour and sex. It must have been one of the libel actions that George most savoured.
By the time South African journalist Jani Allen arrived at the High Court to face George Carman, she had already won £35,000 from previous libel actions.
Oh, yeah, yeah!
As a so-called liberal journalist, she had objected to claims that she'd had an affair with neo-Nazi leader Eugene Terreblanche. This time, it was Channel 4's turn to be sued. The neo-Nazi connection meant there was heightened security for the trial, and it had just got underway when there was a commotion in court.
She just insisted that she would never sleep with a married man, or indeed anyone out of wedlock. And a motorcycle courier arrived with a package for George in court, and he passed it back to Adrian Page.
My first feeling was, oh my God, this is a bomb or something, and I didn't want to open it, and I had passed it back to the solicitors behind me.
And inside this envelope was Jani Allen's diary from 1984. And it was the most extraordinary thing. On the cover was pasted these cutouts from magazines, lips, scantily clad women, sort of schoolgirly sixth form stuff. And inside was the most lurid description of her going to bed with at least 2 Italian men. And it certainly appeared to give the lie to this, I would never sleep with anyone else.
Everything has to be disclosed before you go into court in this country. I don't quite know how George, as he did repeatedly, managed to get away with it, but he would produce a document at the 11th hour and it could swing the case.
George's was the strategy of trying to find something that would take the witness by surprise, and his stage management of bringing it in just at the right moment. I was naturally suspicious about this.
Miss Allen, let me read some of this out to you.
When I saw him holding this diary aloft in his little pink hand, I felt, this is not a good thing. And I started feeling as though there was an icy hand grabbing in my entrails.
Outside, I kissed his neck, and he said, harder, he was so sexy.
Yes.
In your handwriting?
Yes.
True?
It's true that I wrote it.
Is it true that it happened?
No, it is not true. I would like to make the point at this stage.
So that's not true?
Mr. Carman, it's not true.
I see. Let us take the next section. I remember us laughing about the freckles on our backs. I remember it hurting when he was in me. I remember lots of blood on the sheet. True or untrue?
Untrue.
He never hastened over these details. He relished them, he savoured them, so that it was kind of luxuriated in a way that made one cringe, but my goodness, it made an impact.
I remember the silk of his skin and the way he kissed
It's untrue. It didn't happen.
But you wrote it.
I wrote it.
I stayed the night, and it was heaven.
The way George dealt with it was to take the detail and to deal with it in a very clinical fashion. It was quite a difficult one to pull off, to walk that line and not alienate the jury, which he absolutely succeeded in. But I think a lot of advocates would have flinched from using those words, which of course were her words, but used against her.
This notebook is deeply embarrassing. I wrote it when I was under psychiatric care.
I recognize it is embarrassing for you. We made love twice. True or false?
There was one stage when I thought I would faint. Just from the sheer relentlessness of it, I would faint. And he was completely like, you know, those way a lizard looks at one. No emotion whatsoever. Occasionally blinking. Totally bloodless.
If you want a break, please indicate. I'm sure my lord will be sympathetic. But I propose to go and ask you these questions. Do you understand?
I understand. It is easy for your purposes to destroy me in this way. I am at your mercy.
We are both at the mercy of the truth, Miss Allen. And that is what we are pursuing at the moment. You lied about the sexual relationship because it is easy to lie, and because you think that way is the way to get more damages from the jury.
Mr. Carman, whatever award is given for libel, being cross-examined by you would not make it enough money.
There was no sense that he knew how much I was suffering and he wasn't enjoying it. He was enjoying it. I just know that.
The trial judge ruled, well, of course, you have to show actual sexual penetration. And we were, how are we going to do that exactly?
The way presented itself in the form of Linda Shaw, Jarny Allen's former flatmate and friend.
She could give evidence that she had seen Eugene Terblanche with Jarny Allen. And so George would say, so what did you see through the keyhole?
I saw Johnny's feet and her knees up.
And what she'd seen was what George was eliciting for the jury's benefit.
And I saw this huge white bottom on the floor.
You said you saw what you called a bottom.
What colour was the bottom, Miss Shaw?
White.
A white bottom. I would try and use simple but memorable phrases or images to sell my argument to the jury. A white bottom. The hallmark of the case.
White bottom.
Are you able to identify the sex or shape?
I didn't see the genitals. It was a large white bottom.
A large white bottom.
A large white bottom. And?
And what was the bottom doing?
It was on top of Johnny, rising up and down. I assumed they were having sex.
And there was movement up and down?
Yes.
There was movement up and down.
And you thought, yes, I think they've got it now.
Was this movement in any way indicative of sexual activity?
Yes.
They will never forget that picture. The emphasis, the punctuation, have you got it? Are you getting the picture?
It only took the jury 5 hours to reach their verdict. Jarny Allen had lost.
The sobbing, the shock, people rushing out. She's got to get out of the courtroom. The press want to interview her. They want to talk to George. Absolutely extraordinary, quite extraordinary atmosphere.
People always thought that my father was wealthy. even before he became well-known defender Jeremy Thorpe. The reality was that he wasn't. He might have earned a lot of money. Much of it disappeared onto the casino tables. I remember on several occasions when, as a child, the milkman would call. My mother didn't have enough to pay him, so we didn't answer the door and we hid with the curtains closed.
A couple of times he made me sit in with him. I don't know what such perversity that was, because a woman sitting beside a man in a situation like that would be saying, that's shoes for the children, that's the holiday, that's this, that's that. All the money would be allocated out into, necessary things. And to see perhaps a few hundred or a couple of thousand, which in those days would have been an enormous amount of money. And I think later on he went into tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds, just lost on the tables.
We were in the Playboy Club in Manchester, or I had gone in to try and find him, and he had just lost £60,000, which was probably the price, I think, at the time of our home. We had to we had to sell the house in the end to basically pay the debts. He was not a bit interested in money. It meant nothing. And when he lost the 60,000, it was just a shrug of the shoulder.
It was the same theme as winning in the courtroom. It was winning and winning against the odds and winning well and being seen to win. And that is what mattered most to him.
Carmen's reputation as the great defender was built on a simple formula: winning for celebrity clients in the criminal courts. Like Peter Adamson, better known as Len Fairclough in Coronation Street. Facing charges of sexually assaulting young girls, Adamson called for Carmen, and Carmen got him off. Shortly after, he admitted that he'd been guilty all along. Ken Dodd also got Carmen when he faced charges of tax evasion.
Mr. Carman said that to Ken Dodd, accountancy was a mysterious science, as fanciful to him as the Diddy men and the Jam Butty mines which he created.
What Dodd didn't know was that Carman had his own pressing need for victory.
During the Ken Dodd case, we went to the casino. We went there at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and he had a run of bad luck and lost. I think it was about £35,000 that afternoon. But I do remember him very well as we came out into the sunshine, turning to me and saying, well, I'd better go and win the case now, having lost the briefing and essentially most of the money that he was going to be paid for it.
Dodd was cleared, and Carman cemented his reputation for quotable quotes.
Comedians are not chartered accountants, but sometimes chartered accountants are comedians.
That victory propelled Carman into the glamorous and lucrative world of libel. His own fame was growing.
George lived from one case to the next to the next. I honestly believe that he thought that every time he did a very important case that it would bring him some form of satisfaction and contentment, and it didn't, because that wasn't in his nature. There was something that was very destructive inside him. He tried to destroy what he'd built all the time.
You weren't a partner, you were an opponent, living under the same roof. He might come home at 3 in the morning, and of course I was the first person he was going to encounter, when I was going to get all his vented spleen would be directed completely at me.
Typically, I may well have been woken up by that point. Sometimes he would come and get me out of bed. And then he'd be violent towards her.
He could take you by the hair and bang your head against the wall. And just not a couple of times, but bang and bang over and over and over, which is, terrifying.
I used to sort of put my hands up because I didn't want my face damaged, you see. I used to think, oh, protect my face.
I don't really think he knew what he was doing. Punch you, hurt you, do what most people do when they lost control of themselves. And he'd never apologise afterwards. He would be contrite, but he wouldn't apologise.
I had a way of dealing with things. I had a little jacket or something I'd just throw on, pair of shoes, little slip-on shoes, undo the back door, and I could just go out there. And as I say, there were times when when he was in a very foul mood indeed, and God knows what he would have done, just spend the night in the garden, that's all. Sleeping under a tree, we had some tall trees there, and I could just sort of curl up there.
My protection was I used to curl up into a ball. So he could only, strike you like this.
I never look at a pine tree now without thinking about sleeping under the stars with just a jacket on and a nightdress, I can remember a young policeman came to the house once. I phoned the police. And he came in and he saw glass and china and things thrown all over the door, over the dressers and floor and everything. And George just looked at him, even though he was still quite drunk, and he said, "Officer, do you know who I am?" And when he told him, he actually backed out as if from royalty.
His character in court was the same out of court, because he wouldn't leave something alone, and that was his style in court. He would go on and on and on and on till he achieved his goal.
The case introduced a phrase that was used again and again and again. I'm sure it's a phrase that probably had never graced the inside of the High Court before, and that was blowjob.
I'm just playing around, baby. Left for days, and who knows?
Gillian Tailforth was well known for her role as Cathy Beale in EastEnders. She was about to star in a drama of her own making. She had chosen to sue the Sun newspaper, which claimed she'd been caught by police performing oral sex on her partner, Jeff Knights, on a slip road on the A1. She claimed she'd been stroking his stomach during an attack of pancreatitis. The trial got off to a peculiar start.
Someone suggested that there should be a demonstration to see exactly what could be done in the Range Rover. And I agreed. I thought, why not?
And everybody in the court, including the public gallery, trooped down, and the jury, trooped down to the car park of the High Court, where there was the Range Rover in question. And under the direction of the police officer, reconstructed up to a point, of course, up to a point, what he said was going on inside the Range Rover, i.e. a blowjob.
Now, what Miss Tailforth had was celebrity. She was loved by millions, but her celebrity could still be used against her. You played a certain scene in EastEnders a few years ago, the role of a rape victim. I mention it because I'm going to suggest to you that your performance this morning in the witness box, when you were telling the jury that you were outraged and distressed and felt unclean and ashamed, was very similar to what you had to say when you were playing the part of the rape victim.
No, Mr. Carman. That was Cathy Beale. I'm Gillian Tailforth. For the whole of this episode, I've been Gillian Tailforth and will continue to be Gillian Tailforth to the end of this trial. I think it's an insult to say that just because I'm an actress, I must be a liar. It's not very nice for me to have to come here and discuss my sex life. This case has put a terrible strain on me and Jeff's relationship.
Did you rehearse what you had to say this morning?
No, I didn't.
At the end of the first week, the Sun received a phone call from two lads who said they had a video that they thought we might be interested in seeing.
When we first went to see Michael Beloff, our barrister, he said, have you got any skeletons in your cupboard? These will come out. If you've got anything, believe you me, George Carman will get them.
I give good head. I give very good head.
George turned to me and in his inimitable way said, Tom, this phrase, giving head, is it the same as a blowjob? Yes, Tom, I thought so.
You might be wondering what on earth a drunken party 6 years earlier had to do with the case.
I remember coming in on a Monday morning after the end of the first week of the trial, and my junior counsel ringing me up, and it's rather like mission control, I think we have a problem.
We knew in court that George was going to do something. There was a feeling that an enormous rabbit was going to be brought spectacularly out of the smallest hat. He'd sort of been intimating that there was something to come. You know, there will be amusement tomorrow night, gentlemen, he would say, and we'd buy him another drink.
Well, obviously it didn't prove what had gone on in the Range Rover. But if you were on that jury, would you have been more or less likely to believe she was capable of doing what the Sun claimed after seeing that video? It had an immediate effect. Do you see the woman in the front row? The one with the disgusted look on her face? Watch her carefully. She was my weather vane for the case. Every time she flinched, I knew we were hitting the target.
The relevance was to show that she wasn't quite such an innocent girl. When she'd fooled about at a party, demonstrating various things and saying, I give good head, I give good head.
George Carman then said that I was acting out oral sex with this sausage, and in no way whatsoever was I doing that.
First of all, you let the jury believe that you are not in any way an exhibitionist, particularly in anything to do with sex. Looking at the video, is it not right to say that you are prepared to be something of a coarse exhibitionist when in drink over sexual matters?
Not at all, no.
Or the phrase, good head, did that phrase have a sexual connotation?
I was very, very drunk. We were all in high spirits. Just moved away and the sausage was there.
What did you mean by give good head?
Well, I imagine it means holding a man's penis and doing what I was supposed to be doing on the A1. I think they're words everyone uses in this day and age.
Was your behavior not disgusting?
In a kind of priestly way, he clothed himself in a moral authority.
You then took the bottle and put it near the center of your bottom?
Everything was put in a kind of moral language and moral terms.
And used your other hand to simulate masturbation?
And I think that was a very clever way of conveying to the jury that they shouldn't get bogged down in the detail of the evidence. They should think really, where does the justice lie? Where does the truth lie?
Do you think it indecent for a woman of 32 in your position, with a regular part in national television, to stand in the street in daylight and simulate masturbation with a bottle next to your vagina?
Had there been people there, I wouldn't have done it. It was just a joke between friends. I was very drunk.
And the whole impression of your evidence, the clothes you wore, the tears you have shown, the language you have selected, the expressions of outrage you have given to the jury. I suggest all this has been a great show. And the true Gillian Tailforth, when you are in drink, emerges in this video.
No, I'm sorry, you're wrong, Mr. Carman.
It's just a big drama, and somewhere along the lines there's the evidence, and theirs is over here and yours is over here, and there's so much going on, a big drama going on around it, that the evidence gets lost somewhere.
George also was very good at appearing to rise above the fray. When he made his final submissions, he didn't just go in boots flailing in every direction. He'd almost, as it were, appear a kind of impartial figure above this.
Gillian Tailforth isn't quite the demure young lady Mr. Beloff has painted to you. She was behaving in a way that one hopes that the majority of women in this country would never behave. The video is put before you to show there is another Gillian Tailforth, and you will balance them both. Her performance in the witness box and her performance on the video. It may be, members of the jury, that the unfortunate words of Gillian Tailforth, uttered no doubt in jest, in a film she never thought would see the light of day, I give good head, may summarize what happened that night. It may be her epitaph.
I went in for him pretty hard in my final speech. I think I compared him to Torvill and Dean. I think I said he got, what was it? I said he has 10 points for style, but alas, 0 points for content.
Well, that wasn't quite how the jury saw it.
Will the foreman of the jury please stand?
So Tailforth was sitting there in the front, looking very pale and extremely worried, but with a hint of confidence. They gave the verdict.
Do you agree Miss Tailforth and Mr. Knights were in the car as detailed?
Yes, which went against her. And of course, there was a slight silence. And then suddenly, there was this ear-splitting screech of horror.
At which point, Gillian Tailforth, semi-collapsed, screaming, saying, "Call this bloody justice," ran screaming from court. She got around the corner of the corridor, collapsed on the floor. She was wheeled out in a hospital wheelchair. Exit, soap star, stage left, hyperventilating, and about £500,000 poorer. What a finish.
£400,000, that cost Gillian Tailforth, and her reputation. It has been said that I was unnecessarily cruel, but this was no Mother Teresa. It was her choice to sue for libel. not mine.
There's a self-confident coolness about George Best that unnerves some men and fascinates most women.
Bit of a naughty boy, George Best. Man about town. George represented him on, I think, on a couple of occasions, as I recall.
Feel the need in me.
They would often meet up and have a drink together. And on one occasion, George brought him home. Things kind of went on from there. I got a phone call and I was quite flattered. I thought, ooh, being picked up for special treatment, you know. Then we would meet and go out and just generally do things that people do when there is an affair going on. And believe me, I was ripe for an affair then, as you can imagine. It's wonderful. Then, of course, it initiated then divorce proceedings. And that was just the beginning, you know, of trying to get back to being a human being again, I think.
With his marriages over, Carmen's career flourished. Through the late 80s and early 90s, he led a revolution in the fees commanded by barristers. His reputation and his earnings soared.
After my father died, we were deluged in litigation, and the QC that we hired was George Carman. He and his son went one evening to the ABC cinema on the King's Road, and they dropped in on their way home. I wasn't there. Pandora, my wife, opened the door. They come in, they have a cup of coffee, and a few weeks later, I got the bill for a consultation at client's home, £300. I thought it was a tremendous attention to detail on George's part and a hell of a cheek.
I loved the reputation that he charged more than other people, and invariably would try to distance himself from it by saying, oh, that's something you need to speak to my clerk about, or I leave it to your tender mercies was his favourite phrase when we were talking of negotiating a fee, but having been involved in every stage of it.
He once said that he thought that he put so much of his energy into his work, he had very little left for any other area of his life, and I think that was true.
He'd often said to me that his hobby was fishing, and in the 20 years that I was his clerk, he'd never fished once, and never shown any inclination to fish either, and that was his sole hobby, listed in Who's Who.
If you looked through the keyhole of George's house and you didn't know that he lived there, you'd be hard-pressed to say anything about the person who did, because the house had all the charm and soul of the third floor at Harrods furniture department.
The last house he was in was the show house in a new development, and he took it with the furniture as well. It's extraordinary. All done for him, unlived in, except the study where there'd be papers in the mess on the floor or on the desk. He just didn't really live outside his head.
By the mid-90s, Carmen seemed to have his drinking under control. Most of the time. Following a libel victory for Richard Branson against the US lottery giant G-Tech, Carmen faced criticism for his conduct of the case at an appeal court hearing. The night before was a night on the tiles.
The phone was ringing. It was my father. He was clearly the worse for wear. He asked me to come and see him straight away. I duly did. I arrived to find that he was in a bad shape. He was being sick. I then went up to the court with him, and unfortunately, it was quite obvious. Most importantly to his junior, that he was in no fit state to go into court that day. His doctor came within an hour or so, and he was put on a drip to stabilise his body, because he was in that bad a shape from the amount that he'd drunk. He had to be on a drip for several hours.
He always thought that nobody knew about his drinking and gambling. Of course, the world knew. It wasn't a secret, but he thought the judiciary didn't know. Really believed that.
George had a very interesting celebrity status in newspapers because no one was ever rude to him. Because every newspaper knew that any day now something might happen and you would want George on your side. And so the idea of ever writing anything remotely critical was absolutely not on. George was safe, George was golden.
But there was one accolade that Carmen still dearly wanted. To become a High Court judge. The legal establishment, though, didn't seem to want him.
He thought he was a poor boy from Blackpool and therefore wasn't the classic bar material. I think what he didn't fully understand is that he was regarded as an outsider because he was so relentlessly pursuing success. And there is an element about that at the bar. It's the game that is more important than the winning. For George, it was important to win the game.
In 1996, just after winning the so-called libel test for the cricketer Imran Khan against Ian Botham and Alan Lamb, George Carman went into hospital for an operation on his colon. A scan showed the presence of a tumour. Carman was diagnosed with prostate cancer. He chose to keep working, but kept his condition a secret. Less than 12 months later, aged 67, he faced the biggest libel trial of his career.
If it now falls to me to start a fight to cut out the cancer of bent and twisted journalism in our country with the simple sword of truth and the trusty shield of traditional British fair play, so be it. I am ready for that fight.
It was an extraordinary thing for Aitken to do. I can't deny it was alarming. I remember saying straight away, we must get Carmen before Aitken does.
I may have gone over the top. I certainly did go over the top when I said the sword of truth speech. The history of my libel case, in a sense, is, oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. I hope that this House, which is a very fair-minded place, will accept both my assurance and the Cabinet Secretary's assurance, and really to put an end to this hysterical atmosphere of sleaze journalism by The Guardian.
Jonathan Aitken. It was ironic, but only 7 years earlier, I'd represented his sister, Maria, on a drugs charge, and she pleaded guilty. Jonathan, on the other hand, had his sword and his shield and was giving absolutely no quarter. But he was the best prepared witness I ever encountered.
And I happened to be in the High Court when this other case was going on. Jonathan Aitken appeared several times that week in the public gallery. And in fact, he was sitting next to me or sitting quite close to me. And I recognised him. I thought, what's he doing here?
That's a wise tip for any defendant in a libel case or indeed in a criminal case, to go and watch the style of the barrister who is likely to be attacking or cross-examining, because they do have different styles.
Jonathan Aitken was tipped as a future Conservative Prime Minister. He'd been accused by The Guardian and World in Action of having improper relations with the Saudi royal family and of pimping women for them. It was claimed a Saudi businessman had picked up the tab when Aitken stayed at the Ritz Hotel in Paris, and that Aitken had lied about this. The volume of evidence meant the trial would be heard by a judge sitting alone, a serious handicap for Carmen, the great jury advocate. And not the only one. His cancer, which was still a secret, was spreading.
I always knew that there was a lie at the heart of the Ritz bill allegations. At the time, I had steeled myself to give a performance, and I did give a performance. It was like an actor delivering lines, how fiercely the gale blew. I was going to deliver those lines and did.
Mr. Aitken, do I understand your position to be this? You put yourself before this court and the public as an honorable and truthful man?
Yes.
A man who had the privilege of a first-class education in this country?
Yes.
And coming from a distinguished family?
Thank you, yes.
And recognizing, no doubt, the greatest importance of probity and integrity in public life?
Yes.
Because, on occasion, over the decades, and in more recent times, lack of probity and lack of integrity have damaged the image of politics in this country.
All politicians, including me, make mistakes, but I entirely accept the general thrust of what you're saying.
One is not talking about mistakes. One is talking about lack of probity and lack of integrity.
I think there's a very basic style of George Carman's cross-examination which might be called leading someone down a road and closing all the exit gates out along the way.
The fiercest clashes between Aitken and Carmen centred on the Ritz bill. According to Aitken, the bill had been settled in cash by his wife Lolizia. The Guardian and World in Action were convinced Lolizia had been in Switzerland at the time, and the bill was in fact paid by a Saudi businessman. But they didn't have the evidence to prove it. In the meantime, Carmen attacked Aitken for twisting the truth, sharp editing, according to Aitken, in his explanations to cabinet colleagues and civil servants.
What you call sharp editing was a dishonest misrepresentation of the true content and meaning of the letter, was it not?
That's your language. I use my language, which was sharp editing.
But what is the difference between sharp editing and dishonest editing in your mind, Mr. Aitken?
Well, there is a difference.
What is it?
Dishonesty is a blatant lie. Sharp editing, intended to confuse a hostile adversary, may not be very praiseworthy. But I don't think it's as reprehensible as you're trying to make it sound.
If my lord has eventually to make the melancholy decision that you have lied to the cabinet secretary whilst a cabinet minister, that you have lied to the prime minister while a cabinet minister, and that you have lied to this court on all occasions to do with your stay at the Ritz, if that were to be so, you would accept that such a series of lies would prove you totally unfit for public office.
I don't accept any of these melodramatic, hypothetical allegations you're putting to me. But if his lordship were to make those dramatic judgments, obviously, it would be a shattering blow for me.
It would butcher your reputation.
My reputation has been butchered already.
It would butcher it again.
It would.
As long as there wasn't the evidence, even though George Carman could quite rightly huff and puff about the implausibility of it, he couldn't blow the house down without the evidence.
But you knew that was not true, did you not?
I knew by then it was only partly true.
Well, if something is partly true, it follows as a matter of remorseless logic, it is partly false.
Or there has been a mistake.
On your part? Well, there's no room for mistake. You knew that your wife only paid half your bill, even on your own account.
Indeed, I knew that.
Then why did you conceal it from the Cabinet Secretary on the 3rd of March, 1994?
As I tried to explain yesterday, and I do not take any pride in this letter to the Cabinet Secretary, as the Cabinet Secretary and others subsequently accepted, was a device to put my guardian pursuers off the scent.
Oh, so you are prepared to state something that is partly false to the Cabinet Secretary, to throw dust in the eyes of the editor of The Guardian?
I'm afraid that was the position, yes.
That was the position, was it?
He'd go round and round, hitting and hitting. And once you understood that this was his technique, the only question was, were your own foundations strong enough to stand the battering?
George told me and others that he thought he was losing. He thought the judge was sympathetic to Jonathan Aitken. He thought that he wasn't scoring a lot of points in cross-examination, and therefore Jonathan Aitken was likely to succeed.
My lord, the point I'm going to make is that he never corrects a number of errors in that letter.
Yes, well, that may be very regrettable, but the point has been made that Sir Robin has not accurately recorded what is in the documents, and Mr. Aitken never wrote and said there is some...
I think the judge was a little irritated by some of Carman's techniques. George Carman is the kind of counsel who takes liberties, perhaps, in the eyes of a judge, and this judge wasn't going to let him do that.
That is perfectly valid comment, which has already been made.
I just want to catalogue them. First of all, that your wife and daughter were present during the weekend. Secondly...
Well, hold on. Mr. Carman, I have read it. I am sitting here without a jury, Mr. Carman, and I have got the point.
We were completely paranoid that Popplewell was going to fall for the polished old Etonian charm of Aitken, and so we sat there with our hearts sinking as there seemed to be a bond struck up between Aitken and Popplewell.
I simply did not believe Jonathan Aitken's story about Paris. The Guardian took the view that because I'd been at a public school and Jonathan Aitken had been at a public school, we were bound to have the same views and so on. I think it did rather lack judgment as to how judges behave, but still that was their view, and I believe that is still their view.
Mr. Aitken was a remarkable witness, accomplished and perfectly practiced. But what really set him apart was his dictionary, a thing of wonder and a constant means of escape. Mr. Aitken, I am going to have to suggest to you that, to use one of your phrases, you have been less than candid. And whilst I am on those phrases, Mr. Aitken, let me see if we can agree about this. 1, to be less than candid. 2, to engage upon what you call sharp editing by misquoting letters. 3, by the word dissembled. All those are rather polite and sophisticated ways of saying you were not telling the truth, are they not?
No. It must depend upon the circumstances of each situation.
Well, let me put it as plainly as I can once more. Dissemble. What was your understanding of your use of the word dissembled yesterday? To hide or disguise one's true motives or feelings. I submit that it is a polite way of admitting you told a lie.
Well, there is an important linguistic difference. And if I seem to reach for phrases without sounding too skilled in language, a famous one in vogue at the moment is to be economical with the truth. I did not say a direct lie.
Truthful?
You know, it was kind of throwing a fog, if you like, pretense.
Telling or expressing the truth.
And it wasn't a direct lie, but it was a mendacious fog, if you might put it that way.
Honest.
But I accept the criticism, as I have now done several times, that I inadvertently, or maybe advertently, misled him.
Quite simple, really.
To cut out the cancer of bent and twisted journalism in our country with a simple sword of truth and the trusty shield of traditional British fair play, so be it.
You said in a moving public speech that you were going to take out the sword of truth to prosecute these claims for libel. Do you recall that?
I do.
Mr. Aitken, as a man who claims to take up the sword of truth, my last suggestion to you is this. That before this court case, and during it, you have made yourself a stranger to the truth whenever it suits you.
That is unfair and unjust. I believe in the issues raised by what I rather rhetorically called the sword of truth and the shield of fair play.
I thought that Aitken stood his ground and gave no ground. And in that respect, I suppose he came out on top.
I think we were now at the stage where we thought that Aitken was a kind of sort of Houdini. He could get out of anything.
But the increasingly frantic hunt for evidence was about to hand Carmen a stunning last-minute coup.
It came on a rather torpid, languid afternoon. I did notice that George Carman seemed to be not grilling these witnesses as thoroughly as he might have been, and I was faintly puzzled by that.
Aitken didn't know it, but researchers had uncovered receipts and airline manifests proving his wife could not have been in Paris when the bill was paid.
The documents and the British Airways statement arrived in court and were given to me. And I read the statement and looked at the documents, and George knew what I was doing.
I immediately detected that something was going on.
George was not a man to permit the opportunity for a little drama to go by. And so suddenly, he stands up and says to the judge,
My lord, before any further evidence is called by my learned friend.
His voice was sort of pregnant with the expectation that something of great importance was about to be given birth to.
I'm now in a position to provide the plaintiff's solicitor, Mr. Gray, and yourself with a signed witness statement by a lady called Wendy Dawn Harris, who was employed by British Airways. I think, my lord, if I may respectfully say so, it might be important for Mr. Gray and yourself to read it immediately.
Well, that was curtains. I mean, one's had cases where suddenly somebody will get up and say, look, we've settled it. But I don't think anything quite so dramatic where you actually prove without fear of contradiction that the plaintiff is lying.
I was just reading this document, and I realized as I read it that my whole case had been blown apart into a million smithereens, and that my life as I had known it was over.
Tell your children not to do what I've done.
Aitken, of course, lost the case. And as a result of the lies he told George Carman, he was convicted of perjury and sentenced to 18 months in prison.
Mr. Aitken's case reminds me of a rather salutary tale I once heard. There was a man a long time ago who chose to sue a newspaper for libel because they called him a highwayman. The case went to court, and at the end, the jury found against the man. He was arrested there and then at the court and hanged for being a highwayman. You see, in libel, sometimes the risk far outweighs the potential reward. It's worth remembering, I think.
There was a hug for George Carman.
Carmen's last major victory was for Mohammed Al-Fayed against Neil Hamilton. Shortly after, with his grandchildren and long-term companion Karen Phillips by his side, Carmen's deteriorating health forced him to retire.
After he'd retired, he came to a party of ours, and it was the first time that I realized how ill he was, and it was amazing that he came. And he had this pair of brown tartan bedroom slippers on because his feet had swollen so much due to his illness. And he slithered along on these slippers, and it was very heartbreaking and very touching. And he sat himself down in the corner, and he was surrounded by people who all aware, I think, that they were in a way saying goodbye at that point. He was wheezing and breathing like this, but nevertheless still managing to smoke for England.
When he rang me up and told me he was going to die, all I could say was, I'm very sorry. Because he'd had everything that I had to give in the earlier part of his life.
On the 2nd of January last year, just 4 months after he retired,
I think I lived in the naive belief through much of my adult life that he would change, with maturity and so on, and advancing years be a different person. He had so much to give. This was the tragedy of my father. He had such ability, he had such intelligence, such a capacity to communicate. And yet in his personal life, he messed it all up in a way that was entirely self-destructive. And that's hard to understand.
It is easy for your purposes to destroy me in this way.
I am in contempt of this court. Well, hold on. Mr. Carmen, I have read it.
It was a large white bottom.
Amoral, hypocrite, liar. Is that not a scoundrel?
See how I'm walking.
Well, many apologies for the momentary loss of vision there. I hope it didn't spoil your enjoyment of the programme too much.
Oh, feel the need in me. I need you by my side to be my guide. Can't you see my arms are open wide? Feel the need. Oh, feel the need in me.
Is time running out for Jack Bauer?